Everyone talks about nightmares like they end when you wake up. Mine didn't. Mine started the night someone crawled through my window, while my 10-year-old son was asleep just down the hall. The sound was small, almost nothing. A single vibration against my wrist. Not the blare of an alarm, not the crash of glass. Just a quiet signal from the system I built, the one I trusted more than the cops, more than anyone. My eyes were already open. They're open most nights. Sleep isn't something I get much of since Sarah died. She was my wife. She used to fill the silence in this house with her humming, the soft turning of book pages, laughter that drifted through the rooms like light. Now the silence presses on me. It's heavy. It's mine to guard. At 2:14 a.m., the watch buzzed again. A code flashed on the screen. LNDW1. Laundry window breach. Not a glitch. Not a mistake. I test the sensors every single night at 10. This was real. I closed the laptop on the ottoman without a sound. My body moved the way it has for 2 years. Quiet, trained, economical. IT guys aren't supposed to move like that. But grief teaches you things. Fear teaches you the rest. And the police had taught me the most important lesson of all. When trouble comes to your door, you're on your own. The floorboards know me. Every creak is mapped in my head. I passed Jake's door. His sneakers sat by the threshold, his mustard camp t-shirt tossed on the chair. He was dreaming the way kids should dream. Safe, unbothered. Waking him was the part I hated most. Even worse than building steel shutters into our walls, worse than locking away every window Sarah once loved to open. Each time I stole a minute of his peace, something cold and bitter sank deeper inside me. A tiny red light glowed on the hidden panel behind a hallway painting. Confirmation. The seal was broken. The intruder was inside. I tapped the tablet. The camera feed came alive in gray tones. My laundry window gaped open. And then, movement. A dark shape sliding inside, belly low, careful. Slow like a predator, convinced it owned the dark. But the house had already told me everything. She thought she was invisible. She was wrong. My breath was steady. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about resolution. Drawing the final line. One way or another, the harassment was ending tonight, because I knew exactly who it was. I'd been waiting for this. I'd planted a tracker inside her last violation notice, a device so small it looked like a piece of lint on paper. And she couldn't resist. She never could. Power is a hunger that eats itself. Karen Blackman, our HOA president, was finally here. She thought she was hunting me. In truth, she had walked into a box and I was holding the key. I slid nitrile, gloves over my hands, whispered, "Saint Sarah, watch over him," and moved. The hallway swallowed my steps. 2 boards creak. I avoided them. Outside, a train horn moaned in the distance. Inside, only my breath. I eased a wedge under the hallway door so it wouldn't groan. Through the camera feed, I saw her sleeve, her knee. She crawled in like a cat that thought it owned the counter. She wasn't quiet. Not to me. Checklists scrolling in my head. Feeds active. Backups online. Shutters ready. First priority, Jake. I didn't call his name. We had a system. I placed my palm flat against the center of his door. Knocked twice. A rhythm we both knew. Thump. Pause. Thump. From inside, a muffled thud answered. Jake had hit the panic pad. Deadbolt locked. Closet barricade in place. He was awake, alert, safe. 10 years old, and he had a better emergency plan than most grown men. I felt pride for a second. And then guilt. He shouldn't have needed one. But Karen had made sure we did. It started with letters. The grass, too. Long. The basketball hoop too close to the sidewalk. Then came threats about the swing set I'd built for Jake. Then the calls to child services. Then the cops. Just checking in. Always with a smile for her. Always a warning for me. When I begged for decency at an HOA meeting, she told me rules were rules. Her gaze that night had been cold, hollow. The gaze of someone who didn't see neighbors, just targets. And now, here she was. In my home, with zip ties in her hand. I felt the tablet grow warm in my palm. My thumb hovered over the red icon labeled lock. If she moved one step further, the shutters would drop, the trap would close, and this nightmare would flip on her. Stood in the hallway. Invisible. Calm. Ready. A father. A widower. A man who had turned grief into preparation. And as Karen straightened from the laundry room floor, flashlight cutting across my kitchen, I knew the moment had come. This wasn't just another violation notice. This was a war she had brought inside my walls, and tonight it was going to end. Everyone saw the zip ties in her hand, but no one asked why. Not yet. Not the neighbors. Not the cops who always called it a civil matter. But the cameras I built, the house I turned into a quiet machine of truth. They would ask. They would answer. On the tablet screen, her flashlight beam cut across the laundry room. She wasn't fumbling. She wasn't scared. She was moving with the confidence of someone who had done this before. She tested the door into the kitchen, found it locked, and calmly knelt down. A small leather kit slid from her pocket. Lockpicks. She didn't even hesitate. The tumblers clicked one by one, like dominoes falling in her favor. My stomach turned. She had practiced this. Not on me. On others. How many doors had she opened under the cover of night? How many other families had felt a phantom presence in their homes, never knowing she was there? The door gave way with a soft snick. She smiled. I saw it clearly on the feed. A thin, triumphant curl of lips. The smile of a predator who believed the hunt was already over. That was when I spoke. That's far enough, Karen. The words came out steady. Not a shout, not a threat. Just calm, precise, undeniable. She froze. Her entire body stiffened, the flashlight beam jerking upward in panic. It swept across the dark, caught the corner of a cabinet, flared against steel shutters hidden in the walls. Then it landed on me. Her eyes narrowed. Who's there? You know who it is. I let her see me. No weapon in my hands, just the tablet. Calm, collected. A man who had been waiting. David Mercer. The man whose house you just broke into. Her mask slipped for just a second. A flash of surprise. Then the ex-cop reflexes came back. She straightened, lifted her chin, and spoke like she was still wearing a badge. There was a report of a water leak, she said flatly. I'm conducting an emergency inspection. At 2 a.m, with lockpicks, with zip ties. I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. You have no such right of entry. You picked my lock. I have you on camera. Her flashlight beam shook. Just slightly. She steadied it with both hands, using the light as a weapon now, trying to blind me. Stand back, she barked. I'm in active inspection mode. Of what? I asked softly. My towels? My son's sneakers by the door? For the first time, she faltered. The words hung between us, brittle, absurd. You're obstructing official business? She snapped, stepping toward me. I raised the tablet higher, its small red recording square glowing. And you're committing burglary. A beat of silence. The weight of the truth pressing in. Her gaze flicked to the ceiling, to the corners, searching for cameras. She knew, she realized. She was trapped. But fear, real fear, only showed for a flicker. Then the old rage came back, hardening her jaw. She didn't back down. She took another step forward, brandishing the flashlight like a baton. You have no proof, she hissed. Proof was the one thing I had in abundance. My thumb dropped onto the red square labeled lock. The house answered. A low hum filled the walls. Then a heavy thump. One window sealed. Another. Then another. The sound echoed through the rooms like a vault closing. In seconds, the shutters dropped across every window and glass door, plunging the house into perfect black. Karen gasped. Her flashlight beam whipped around, hitting only cold steel where glass used to be. She spun in circles, the predator suddenly caged. What did you do? Her voice cracked now, raw, furious. I didn't answer. I pressed the second icon. A hiss whispered from the vents. Thick white fog spilled down like a curtain, swallowing the kitchen in seconds. Karen coughed, waving the beam uselessly through the cloud. It bounced back at her, scattering into a blinding glow. She couldn't see. She couldn't move without stumbling. The house was no longer hers to stalk. It was mine. I stayed in the hallway, outside the densest fog, watching her shape blur on the tablet feed. She stumbled against the counter, her breathing ragged. Her hand groped for the knob she had picked, twisted it in panic. Good. The knob was coated in UV dye, invisible but permanent. Now it clung to her palms, her sleeves. Evidence she couldn't scrub away. Her voice broke through the fog. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I have authority. Authority? Not here. Not in my house. You had authority, I said quietly, almost to myself. Now you have proof painted all over your hands. She slammed her fist against the doorframe, anger drowning her fear. The sound echoed down the hall, carried into Jake's room. For a heartbeat, I panicked. But then I heard it. A faint click on the walkie-talkie. Still in the spot, Jake whispered. Steady, calm, 10 years old and braver than most men I'd ever met. I closed my eyes for a moment. Relief, pride, and then focus. This was the moment I had built for. 2 years of preparation, every sensor, every bolt, every line of code. And it was working. The predator was blind. The house was a cage. The evidence was undeniable. But I knew Karen. I knew what came next. She would double down. She always did. And when she did, I'd be ready. Everyone heard the siren, but only I knew why it was screaming. Before the shriek split the night, there was only the fog. Heavy, choking, blind. Karen staggered inside it, flashlight flaring uselessly against the white curtain. I could hear her breathing change. Fast, shallow, angry. She had come here believing she was the hunter. Now she was trapped in a box she couldn't escape, and the silence of the house pressed against her like a verdict. Show yourself, she barked into the haze, her voice breaking. She wanted authority to carry her, like it always had. But her tone betrayed her, more plea than command. I see enough, I said quietly. The words carried through the fog like a blade. Her flashlight beam jerked, slicing the air in frantic arcs. She was blind. I wasn't. My tablet showed her heat signature, every stumble, every misplaced step. She lunged for the mudroom door, yanking, at the knob again. More dye smeared across her hands. Evidence layered on evidence. The hunter was marking herself with every move. I raised the pocket camera, voice calm, steady for the record. Intruder remains inside. 2:19 a.m. Subject attempting escape. Subject leaving prints. Karen's answer was a desperate curse and the crash of a mixing bowl as she collided with the kitchen island. I took 2 silent steps forward. Final. Warning, I said, sharper now. Lie down on the floor, hands visible. You can't see anything, she snapped. But the fear was there. It threaded through her words like cracks in glass. I see enough, I repeated, and tapped the tablet once. 2 ceiling strobes flashed. Sharp, blinding bursts of white that froze her in silhouette. She flinched too late, her face caught mid-snarl, her hands raised in defiance. The images saved themselves automatically, time-stamped and clean. Documentation, not domination. Proof. Her response was predictable. She turned reckless. She clawed at the breaker panel, ripping the cover open. Her fingers scrambled at the wires. She thought she could kill the power, plunge us both into chaos, but there was nothing to kill. Marine batteries don't have breakers. They don't give up. She slammed the panel shut with a roar and kicked it, the hollow thud carrying straight down the hallway. For a moment, my chest locked. Jake. His room was just past that echo. Status, I called, my voice calm but pitched for him. The walkie clicked softly. My boy's voice came through, steady, solid. Still in the spot. Relief washed through me like fire and ice. Perfect, I said. Hold that plan. Karen didn't hear him, or maybe she did, and it only enraged her more. She stumbled again, hands out, crashing against the end table, smearing more dye into the wood. Each mistake wrote her guilt, brighter in invisible ink. I stepped closer, curtain rod in hand now, heavy fabric ready. She never saw it coming. A snap, a crack like thunder as the curtain tore free. The weighted cloth lashed out, wrapping her arms, shoulders, head. She twisted, fell, tangled in the weight of her own arrogance. "You're done," I said, voice calm, steady. My knee pressed lightly against her back, my hands open for the camera. Procedure, not punishment. She bucked once, twice. But the fog, the weight, the cameras, the truth, they pinned her better than I ever could. And then the siren came alive. I hit the third button. The sound ripped through the house like the cry of something wounded and furious. A piercing shriek, shrill enough to tear sleep from every neighbor on the block. My own ears rang. My chest vibrated. But I held my ground. Because that sound wasn't for me. It wasn't even for her. It was for them, the witnesses. The neighbors stirred. Lights clicked on across the street, one by one, like dominoes in the night. A dog barked. A window slid open. The fog swirled around us, hiding Karen's frantic struggle. But the house had already spoken. Every camera was recording. Every shutter was locked. And now the world outside was waking. I cut the siren after 10 seconds. Enough to shatter the quiet. Enough to summon the eyes I needed. For a heartbeat, silence rushed back in. The tick of the stove clock. The faint hiss of fog. Karen's ragged breath under the curtain. Then a voice outside, muffled through the walls. "David? You hosting a fire drill at 2 a.m? Freddie, my neighbor. Always first to stick. His nose in. Tonight, his nosiness was a blessing. Another voice, Mrs. Chen. If it's another raccoon, tell it to pay rent this time. I raised the pocket camera high. Not a raccoon, I said, loud enough for the porch mics to catch. Intruder inside, please stay back. Blue lights flickered down the street. A local cruiser, curious. My stomach tightened. Karen's old colleagues, the ones who always told me it was a civil matter. The officer stepped out, hand on his flashlight. More than his gun. Neutral. Too neutral. Evening, I called, calm, clear. Conflict of interest here. I've requested state police. Would you mind standing by? He nodded slowly, staying at the curb. Translation, he knew better than to step into this mess. Inside the fog, Karen twisted, her voice sharp, furious. Officer, it's me, Karen, get him out of my way. But he didn't move. He didn't even answer her. He just stood there, staged. Karen screamed again, louder this time, the sound ragged. This is an emergency inspection. I have implied consent. From outside, Freddie barked a laugh. Implied by who? Your clipboard? A ripple of uneasy chuckles spread through the growing crowd. Karen's authority was bleeding out into the night. And the house was telling the truth. I steadied the camera on her tangled form, my voice level. Scene is secure. Witnesses in place. Subject contained. The neighborhood was awake now. Phones lit up the dark. Porches glowed. Dogs barked. The chiba. Predator had wanted shadows. She got spotlights instead, and the show was just beginning. Everyone wanted to believe she still had power, until the curtain fell away and they saw her for what she was. I kept my knee light against her back, not crushing, just steady. My camera caught everything. Open hands. Calm voice. No violence. No rage. Just procedure. That mattered. Because out there on the street, my neighbors were gathering, and when they told the story later, I wanted them to remember what they saw, not what she shouted. From outside, voices overlapped. Freddie's eye. Camera phone already aimed like a spotlight. Mrs. Chen whispering into hers, narrating for whoever would watch later. Marty the ham radio guy muttering into his headset, logging the time. The neighborhood was awake. The audience was assembled. Karen bucked once more under the curtain, spitting words into the fog. He trapped me. He's lying. This is harassment. Raised my voice just enough for the porch mics. Calm, steady. Scene remained secure, intruder contained, no weapons, witnesses present. She froze at that. The word witnesses landed heavy. For years, she had controlled the narrative. One notice at a time, one threat at a time, always private, always isolated. Tonight, the silence was broken. Tonight, the story wasn't hers anymore. I tapped the tablet. The front shutter rumbled. Upward. Steel revealing wood. The neighborhood leaned in, hushed, waiting. I called out, clear, precise. I'm coming out. The intruder is secured. I am not armed. Please stand back. I stood. Karen twisted under the weight of the curtain, tangled and gasping, her flashlight useless now. She looked less like an authority figure and more like what she truly was, a trespasser caught red-handed. I unlocked the deadbolt, opened the door, and stepped onto the porch. What I saw stopped me cold. A dozen neighbors stood in the yellow wash of porch lights and phone screens. Pajamas, robes, slippers. Every face was lit from below by the glow of recording cameras. A sea of tiny red dots aimed at me. Evidence, witnesses, a mirror of judgment. David? Freddie said, lowering his phone for a second. What the hell is going on? We thought you were being robbed. In a way, I said. My voice carried, calm, unshaken. In a way, I was. I turned, raising the camera to the open door. Behind me, in the fog, Karen stumbled to her feet, the curtain slipping from her shoulders. Her blouse was wrinkled, her face twisted in fury. Her hands shook as she pointed at me, trembling with rage and humiliation. He's lying, she screamed. This was an inspection, an emergency. He assaulted me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed in. I kept my tone even, almost conversational. That is Karen Blackman, president of our HOA. She broke into my home through a laundry room window at 2:14 this morning. I have her on video picking my internal locks. She was carrying zip ties. She is a former police officer, and she is detained. The words landed like thunder. The crowd erupted into murmurs, sharp gasps, whispered curses. They knew her. They'd all felt her power, her pettiness, her constant gaze. But to see her like this, caught, exposed, was different. Karen lunged forward, desperate. Don't listen to him. He lured me in here. This is a setup. Then you won't mind the cameras, I said, turning my phone toward her, or the invisible dye on your hands from the window latch and the doorknob you picked. Instinctively, she looked down. Her palms glistened faintly in the porch light. A flicker of panic flashed in her eyes. That was all it took. Mrs. Rodriguez, arms folded, stepped forward. She threatened my cousin, she said loudly, told him she'd call. Immigration because his truck was parked on the street. He's a citizen. She's been doing this to all of us. Mr. Henderson, the old man from down the block, leaned on his cane. She said she'd put a lien on my house over a crack in the driveway. My house is paid for. I've lived here 40 years. She said she'd see me put out on the street. The words tumbled forward, one voice at a time. Stories of threats, petty fines, harassment stretched over years. Each testimony was another nail in the coffin of her authority. Karen's face flushed crimson. She screamed over them, desperate, frantic. Lies! All of it lies! I am your president! I keep this neighborhood in order. No, Freddie called back, his voice sharp as glass. You keep it in fear, the crowd murmured in agreement. Phones never lowered. Every second was captured. I raised my own voice, steady, directed to the cameras. I am not calling the local police. The intruder is a former member of their department. I am calling the state police. If locals arrive first, they will stand. On camera. Every phone caught it. Evidence. A declaration no one could twist later. I dialed, hit speaker. State police, how can I help you? Came the calm voice. My name is David Mercer. I have a burglar detained at my residence. The suspect is Karen Blackman, retired officer of the local department. I request immediate state assistance due to a conflict of interest. The suspect is unarmed but hostile. Multiple civilian witnesses present. A pause. Then the answer. Understood, sir. Units en route. Do not engage further. Secure the scene. I ended the call. The silence afterward was different, heavy. Final Karen's bravado crumbled. Her eyes darted around the porch to the neighbors she'd once ruled over. None of them looked at her with fear anymore, just anger, just clarity. She shrieked one last time. You'll regret this, all of you. You'll regret. But the rest was cut off by the clean rising wail of sirens approaching. Not hers, not mine, theirs, state police. The sound of real consequences. The crowd shifted, murmurs tightening into something new. Anticipation, vindication. The moment the tyrant would finally face a world bigger than the one she thought she controlled. And as I stood there, camera high, neighbors gathered close, my son safe behind a locked door, I knew. The house had told the truth. The monster wasn't outside anymore. It was trapped inside. And this time, it couldn't escape. Everyone had their phones raised when the state police arrived, and that made all the difference. 2 cruisers rolled in with sirens cut, their clean blue strobes painting the street in cold light. The crowd parted, holding their ground, but leaving space. Even the dogs went quiet. We all knew what this moment was. The night had been a rumor, a whisper, a private war, and now it was about to become official. The first trooper stepped out, younger, eyes sharp. The second was older, heavier around the shoulders, his movements deliberate. They scanned the scene, fog still leaking from the front door, neighbors in pajamas with cameras glowing, Karen's shadow flailing inside like a trapped bird. I lifted the pocket cam high, voice firm, clear. Sir, camera running. Intruder identified as Karen Blackman, ex-cop, marked with UV dye on entry points. The younger trooper clicked his body cam on without a word. The older one gave a single nod. Professional, detached, no recognition, no bias. Relief flickered through me. Behind me, Karen's voice tore out of the fog, shrill and furious. Trooper, listen to me. I am the president here. This man attacked me. I was conducting an inspection. Hands, the older trooper interrupted, his voice flat, final, not a request. A command that closed like a door. She froze for a heartbeat, then thrust her hands forward, trembling. Under the trooper's portable black light, they glowed a faint, damning violet. Gasps rippled through the neighbors, phones zoomed in, recording. Every shimmer. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice cut the night. Told you! The trooper's tone never changed. Ma'am, you are under arrest for burglary and criminal trespass. He read her rights slow, steady, deliberate, the way only someone who had done it 1,000 times could. You have the right to remain silent. Karen twisted, desperate, her eyes wild. You can't do this. I know you're captain. I'll have your badge. Hands behind your back, the younger trooper said, not even glancing at her face. The cuffs clicked shut, metal on bone, the sound of authority leaving her wrists for good. The crowd exhaled all at once. A murmur spread through them. Not fear this time, but something closer to release. Vindication. Freddie whispered into his phone, a grin breaking through his mustache. And seen. Karen turned her head, searching the crowd, desperate for a lifeline. You'll regret this, she spat. Every single one of you. This neighborhood will fall apart without me. But no one spoke up for her. Not one. The younger trooper guided her forward, firm but not rough. She fought every step, her shoulders rigid, her voice climbing into a screech. But it didn't matter. The cuffs silenced her better than any fog. The older trooper turned to me, his eyes steady. Mr. Mercer, scene secure. Witness statements will be taken. Yes, sir, I said, lowering the tablet at last. My arm felt heavy, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. Behind me, the fog began to thin, rolling, out the door like smoke after a fire. Inside, the house looked scarred but steady, intact. The fortress had done its job. Dad? Jake's voice whispered from the walkie still clutched in my hand. I lifted it to my lips, forgetting the crowd, forgetting the cameras. All clear, I said softly. You're safe. The relief in his answering sigh nearly dropped me to my knees. The neighbors heard it. Some smiled, some looked away, their own eyes damp. For 2 years they had watched from a distance, maybe wondering, maybe doubting. Tonight they had seen. Tonight they understood. The troopers escorted Karen past the crowd. Phones followed her every step. Her blouse hung loose, her face pale, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. The same neighbors she had terrorized for years now looked at her without fear, without hesitation. She was small now, exposed. When the cruiser door slammed shut, the sound was different from the shutters, different from the siren. It wasn't a warning. It was an ending. For a moment, the street stood still. No one moved, no one spoke. We just stared at the car that held her, watching the flashing lights carry her away. Then Mrs. Chen whispered, just loud enough for the porch mics. It's over. Her words rippled like a wave through the crowd. Shoulders relaxed, phones lowered. The tension that had clung to our street for years cracked and fell away in the cool night air. I turned back toward the house, the fog drifting like the ghost of the war we'd just fought. I thought of Sarah. How she had hated what I'd done to the place, the locks, the shutters, the drills, the fortress I had built out of grief and fear. But tonight that fortress had saved us. Tonight, it had told the truth. Neighbors approached one by one. Freddie clapped my shoulder. Hell of a show, David. Hell of a show. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes shone, her voice trembling. She won't hurt any of us again. Mr. Henderson leaned on his cane, nodding slow. You did what none of us could. Didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I hadn't done it alone. The house had helped. The cameras, the neighbors who finally stood up. And Sarah, in the silence, reminding me what mattered most. Jake, safe upstairs, dreaming unbroken dreams. As the state police drove away with Karen, the porch lights stayed on longer than usual. Phones stayed up, recording the end of an era. Not just for me, but for all of us. The tyrant was gone. The neighborhood was awake, and the night was finally ours again. Everyone thought it ended on the porch. The cuffs, the cruiser, the neighbors with their phones raised like lanterns. It felt final. But the truth was, that night was only the beginning. Because Karen's greatest secret wasn't in my kitchen. It was 5 miles away, in a storage unit no one knew existed. Except me. It started with a conversation the next morning. The adrenaline had faded, but not the vigilance. I hadn't slept. Jake was still upstairs, finally resting in peace. I sat at my desk, evidence spread across the table. Video files, screenshots, logs. All airtight. All ready. Detective Miller. From the state police had been professional, skeptical but fair. He'd seen enough liars in his career to know how to separate noise from truth. But when he finished his initial interviews, I stopped him at the door. There's one more thing, I said. My voice didn't shake, but my hand did when I pulled the phone from my pocket. She wasn't just watching us. She was tracking us, and I can prove it. I showed him the notice, the violation letter she had shoved through my door a week before, the one I'd cut open, slid a tracker into, and resealed so neatly she never noticed. The detective leaned in, unimpressed at first, until I opened the software. The map came alive, dotted with lines, movements, pings. This is her car, I explained, pointing to the daily path from her house to the HOA office to the grocery store. Normal, predictable, but this... I filtered by midnight to 5 a.m. The map lit up with crawling lines through our subdivision. Paths cutting across lawns, slipping between houses, looping around backyards. She wasn't walking the sidewalks, I said, my voice heavy. She was stalking. Every night. Miller's eyes narrowed, his doubt falling away. She circled your house a dozen times. And not just mine, I said, zooming in. The Rodriguezes, Henderson, anyone who ever pushed back against her. The detective's jaw tightened. This isn't harassment anymore. This is premeditation. But the map wasn't done. Once a day, the tracker pinged from outside town, always the same place. A self-storage facility. Unit 7B. She carried the notice with her, I said. Wherever she went, it went. And it led here. Miller didn't hesitate. He got on the phone. An hour later, we stood in front of a corrugated door under buzzing fluorescent lights, the air heavy with dust and motor oil. The manager's bolt cutter snapped the lock. When the door rolled up, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Inside wasn't a storage unit. It was an office, a war room, a stalker's command center, maps, pinned to corkboards with colored tacks, red, yellow, green. Every home in our subdivision marked, cataloged, assessed. My house had a bright red tack stabbed into it so hard the paper tore. Miller lifted a hand, stopping us at the threshold. Hold! Look! We followed his finger. A pinhole camera in the roll-up's crossbar. A blinking LED on a shoebox in the, corner. Passive surveillance, or maybe an uplink. Let's not let her phone home, Miller muttered. I pulled a Mylar sleeve from my bag. An IT man's paranoia turned blessing. The younger trooper unplugged the box and dropped it inside. The light died. Only then did we step in. The place smelled like paper and toner, with a faint, sour edge of obsession. On one corkboard, notes scribbled in tight handwriting. Leverage, kids, mortgage, immigration, alone. My name circled 3 times. Alone. Kids. The words dug into me like a blade. Miller's face was grim. This is leverage mapping, threat matrices. Another board held photos clipped with pins. Jake, in the yard. Me, taking out trash. Neighbors I recognized, caught in ordinary private moments they never knew were stolen. The younger trooper's hand hovered over a stack of files. This is a case file system, he muttered, on the entire neighborhood. He was right. Every family with a colored tack had a folder, work schedules, school hours, mortgage records, even Sarah's obituary, printed and underlined. But the worst was inside a locked metal footlocker. Miller's bolt cutter bit through, and when the lid creaked open, my throat closed. Inside were blank arrest forms. Real ones. With serial numbers filed off, stolen from the local precinct before she retired. And notes labeled final compliance protocols, a playbook of intimidation, child services threats, fraudulent liens, staged emergencies, a system of fear, weaponized and perfected. This isn't just trespass, Miller said, shaking his head. This is conspiracy, fraud, abuse of authority. I filmed every inch, every folder, every tack, not just for evidence, but for the neighbors, for the ones who had lived under her thumb and thought they were alone. A buzzing sound cut through the silence. A phone, left on vibrate, danced across the desk. Caller ID, Arthur Board, the HOA's other president. Miller tilted his head at me. Patterns are their own confession, he muttered. The phone stopped. Started again. Another name. Another. Connection. The troopers kept digging. A Pelican case filled with trackers like the one I'd planted. Only hers were labeled with names and house numbers. She had been watching us all, playing both sides. This ends tonight, Miller said flatly. His voice carried the weight of years, of cases that didn't always close. But this one would. I filmed one last sweep of the room. The maps, the files, the playbook of a tyrant who thought she was untouchable. She had built her empire on secrecy, on fear. But now it was all exposed, pinned to walls, cataloged in files, glowing in the ultraviolet truth of her own obsession. She thought she was the watcher. She thought she controlled the board. But in the end, it was her who had been tracked. Her who had been trapped. Her who had left a digital trail straight into the heart of her empire of control. And now, with every second recorded, every file cataloged, that empire was about to collapse. Everyone thought the meeting would be like all the others, quiet, controlled, suffocating. But that night, the silence broke. The community clubhouse overflowed. Folding chairs scraped across tile floors as neighbors packed the room, shoulder to shoulder. The board sat at their table up front, 3 figures pale and nervous, clutching microphones they'd always used as shields. For years, those mics had amplified Karen's voice. Tonight, she wasn't there. Tonight, the room belonged to us. I didn't plan to speak. I told myself I was just there to deliver evidence. But when the crowd started chanting, "Let Mercer speak. Let him speak," the board president, Arthur, had no choice. His hand trembled as he tapped the mic. "Mr. Mercer," he stammered, Do you have something you wish to address to the board?" I carried my laptop to the front. No podium, no notes. Just a simple table and the projector cable waiting. My voice was steady, clear. "I'm not here to talk about my lawn or my mailbox," I said. "I'm here to talk about what happened at my house 2 nights ago. And I don't need to tell you. I'll show you." I pressed play. The screen lit up, the room filling with grainy night vision gray. Gasps rippled instantly. Karen's figure appeared, crawling through my laundry window, lockpicks flashing in her hand. The crowd murmured louder. They saw her step into my kitchen, heard her lie about a water leak inspection at 2:16 a.m. They watched as I locked the house down, steel shutters slamming into place. They saw the fog rolling in, Karen stumbling, panicked, trapped, and then they heard my voice, calm and steady, reassuring Jake through the locked door. They saw me restrain her with nothing more than a curtain, using no more force than necessary. They watched the moment the front shutter rose and their own faces, lit by phone screens, filled the camera frame as witnesses. When the footage ended, I shut the projector off. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, vibrating, alive with anger and recognition. Then Mrs. Rodriguez stood. Her voice trembled, but the truth in it was iron. She did the same to us, not breaking in, but watching, always watching. She threatened to call immigration on my cousin because his truck was parked on the street. He's a citizen. The words broke the dam. Mr. Henderson rose, leaning hard on his cane. She told me she'd put a lien on my house for a crack in the driveway. My house is paid for. I've lived there 40 years. She said she'd see me thrown out. Another voice. Then another. Neighbors I'd seen for years. Faces I'd passed on sidewalks, each standing to tell their story. Fines for imaginary violations. Threats whispered under breath. Anonymous calls to child services. Noise complaints at midnight. Every tale was another stone lifted, another shadow exposed. The board members looked sick. Their plausible deniability was crumbling in real time. They weren't facing one angry homeowner anymore. They were facing an entire neighborhood finally awake. Arthur, the board president, wiped sweat from his brow. The board was not aware of the extent of these activities. He stammered. "We moved to immediately remove Karen, Blackman, from her position as president, and to turn over all records to the state police." The vote was unanimous. Applause thundered through the room, raw and desperate, more relief than celebration. Freddie shot his hand up from the middle rows. "Point of popcorn," he called out. "What about all our fines?" The board president swallowed. "We will void any citation not grounded in the original bylaws." "And written apologies," Mrs. Rodriguez added, her eyes sharp. Arthur blinked, pale. "And written apologies. Mr. Henderson's voice cut in, rough but steady. "And interest on the lien you threatened." A nervous laugh skittered across the room, but it didn't die this time. It grew. Neighbors nodded. For the first time in years, they weren't afraid to laugh at her power. From the back, Marty the ham radio guy waved his notebook. "For the record, I logged her midnight strolls on my scanner. Dates, times, everything. Please clap." Half the room actually clapped. Detective Miller rose, his presence steady and grounding. "For criminal matters," he said, "keep your videos, your photos, your logs. My office will coordinate with the DA. Bring your stories, bring your dates, bring your truth." A woman near the front raised her hand, her voice breaking. "She made me take down my son's swing set. Said it was non-compliant. Can we put it back up?" Arthur found his spine at last. "Please do. The board will adopt a new rule. Article 1, don't be a jerk." Laughter burst across the room, this time full and real. The sound filled the space like sunlight through a broken window. Freddie leaned toward me, a crooked grin on his face. "You think they'll name the new park after you?" No, I said, shaking my head. Name it after Jake. From the front? Row. A small cheer rose for Jake. My boy, safe at home, asleep in his bed, unaware his name had just become a symbol of something bigger, of freedom. For the first time in 2 years, I let myself smile. Just for a second. Just enough to taste what life might be like when fear no longer held our street hostage. The neighborhood was no longer silent. It was speaking, shouting, laughing. And the tyrant who had lived off our fear was gone. Everyone thought the silence would return to our street, but it didn't. At least not the kind of silence we'd lived with before. The next morning felt unreal. The night's adrenaline had burned out, but its weight lingered in the walls. Jake slept past sunrise for the first time in months, his door unlocked, his breathing deep and steady. I stood in the hallway, listening. The quiet was different now. Not heavy, not haunted, just quiet. The state police had been efficient, almost cold. They bagged Karen's lockpicks, her zip ties, the curtains still wrapped around her wrists when they carried her out. They logged every minute of footage, every timestamp, every voice from the porch. But the real weapon wasn't what happened. In my kitchen. It was what we found later in her storage unit. The judge didn't hesitate. He watched the footage of her crawling through my window. He saw the maps of our subdivision, the trackers labeled with neighbors' names, the files cataloging our lives like prey. He read the notes, final compliance protocols, and he denied her bail, flight risk, danger to the community. The woman who had once carried herself like an untouchable force of order now sat behind steel bars, stripped of the one thing she worshipped most, control. But the ripples didn't stop with her. The local police department was forced into review. Officers who had brushed off our complaints as civil matters were placed on leave, some facing investigation of their own. The HOA board, long her rubber stamp, collapsed under the weight of evidence. One by one, they resigned or were voted out, and something new took root. We rewrote the rules. Not in secret meetings, not through threats or fines, but together. Neighbors in a crowded clubhouse, voices raised, laughter cutting through old fear. The new bylaws were simple, humane. The very first line read, "Every homeowner has the right to privacy and quiet enjoyment of their property." Article 1. Plain, decent, fair. Mrs. Rodriguez hung her cousin's wind chimes back on her porch. Mr. Henderson patched his driveway crack with the help of half a dozen volunteers, no fine required. A swing set went up in the Johnsons' yard. Kids laughed on the street again, their voices no longer hushed. And in the center of it all, Jake ran with them, his sneakers pounding the pavement, his laughter rising into the evening. For the first time in years, his joy wasn't shadowed by drills, codes, or locks. It was just joy. I dismantled the fortress, piece by piece. The shutters stayed bolted open inside the walls. The fog system powered down. The panic pad retired. The house breathed again, full of sunlight and fresh air. The only thing I kept was the doorbell camera, not as a weapon, but as a simple eye, no different from any other suburban dad's. I still sit in my old leather chair at night, but it's not a watch anymore. It's just a seat, a place to rest, a place to think, and I think about Sarah. She wouldn't have liked the man I had to become, the careful, methodical planner who turned a home into a trap. But she would have understood. She would have seen the love underneath the steel. And I believe deep down, she would have been proud. Sometimes I still hear her voice in the quiet, not heavy anymore, but light. A reminder that safety isn't found in walls or locks. It's found in proof, in truth, in the courage to stand when no one else will. Karen thought fear was power. She thought intimidation could bend people forever. But fear only lasts until someone shines a light on it. Proof lasts longer. Truth lasts longest. She took a plea deal. Faced with the mountain of evidence, the trackers, the files, the testimonies, her lawyer told her it was the only option. She will serve years in prison for felony stalking, breaking and entering, and conspiracy. Her empire of petty terror is dust. The neighborhood is healing, slowly but steadily. The porch lights stay on at night, but not as warnings, as welcomes. People wave more. They talk more. They laugh more. The street feels alive again, and Jake sleeps. Through the night. Peacefully. No drills, no codes. Just the harmless, happy dreams of a 10-year-old boy who finally feels safe at home. That's a victory worth anything. I ask myself sometimes, how far does a man go to protect his own? I thought the answer was walls, locks, steel shutters. But the truth is different. You go as far as you have to. But you don't fight the monster by becoming one. You don't answer lies with more lies, or threats with more threats. You answer with patience, with preparation, with proof so undeniable that the truth itself becomes the trap. That's what ended it. Not rage, not fists, not fire, just truth, steady as steel. So the house is quiet now. Peaceful. Sarah would have loved this kind of quiet. And every night, when I hear Jake's laughter through the walls before he drifts off to sleep, I know I did what I had to do. Not just for him. Not just for me. But for all of us. Because sometimes the only way to save a neighborhood is to let the truth crawl in through the same window the monster thought it owned, and lock it there, forever.